Hello, my name is Gervine, and this is Simmer, and welcome to our Hedgerow Hub. We would like to start off by saying a huge thank you to everybody who came today. We really appreciate it. Did everybody fill out their pre-surveys?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, sweet.
All right, so just a little bit about us. The Sutter County Research Conservation District is a special district formed under the Division 9 of the California Public Resource Code. We work closely with farmers, ranchers, and the community to get conservation on the ground in the Yuba-Sutter area. We are governed by a five-member board of local landowners who understand the agricultural and environmental concerns facing the Yuba-Sutter area.
Our staff is also involved in the agricultural world and cares deeply for the community they live and work in. The work we do is important. We do on-the-ground projects, educational programs, provide technical workshops, coordinate work groups, and much more.
And our guest speaker is Paul Handel.
All right, thanks for attending. We have a large crowd way back there. I hope you could hear me. So what is a hedgerow? Hedgerow is, I guess, in the residential area, it's something you plant bushes on the property line to keep your annoying neighbors away, I guess. But we're going to talk more about in the farm. So I have a hedgerow over here, as you can see. I didn't really, when I planted this, I wasn't really looking in a lot of the benefits of having hedgerow. But later on, I found out there was plenty. For example, when we used to do a herbicide spray, and we always have a south wind problem here a lot, and then we weren't able to spray a lot of time. And I've been a weekend farmer for a long time because I have a full-time job downtown Sacramento. So I want to come here and spray, and I have only weekends to do it. And then once I planted the hedgerow here, I noticed that even though there was wind, and once I get inside the orchard, it break the wind. I mean, there was I couldn't feel the wind. And so I saw a benefit there. And I continue to grow more and plant it even closer than before. But also, there's a lot of other benefit, not just that. I mean, when I want to park my equipment and I don't have a shop here, it's like a privacy also. It acts like privacy. Nobody really knows what you got parked over here, so I like that factor. And then also we have a lot of trucks going by here from the fertilizer place. And so there was a lot of dust blowing. It would the dust would blow, get on the trees, and we would have more mites actually. So once we have the hedgerow here, we got less mite actually, believe it or not. So that helped. And also we noticed I grew on the north side. There's like a hedgerow with pomegranates. You get free fruit and stuff.
So it doesn't have to be specifically one type of plant in the hedgerow.
Right.
So it could be a variety of things.
Right.
It doesn't have to be it could be like a rootstock or a pollinator or some of that.
Right. So basically what I have is a rootstock. I mean, I use this every year. We cut it down and then it grow back again, and we use it as this is a Hansen rootstock, and it's used widely for almonds. Not up here because we have the water table issue and clay soil. This is more of a sandy soil used, so it's used in Fresno County a lot. But it also attracts, depending on the type of plant you go with and the kind of crop you have. It can, for example, bees have a habit of coming to a particular spot for a while. They make a habit. So say if you have a hedgerow, depending what kind of crop you have, you could have something bloom a week before your crop blooms, and it could attract bees, and they're already there before your actual crop comes into full bloom.
So what you're saying is in the off season, kind of, if they're to build up your bee.
Yeah.
kind of have your hedgerow set up for like to get the bees to forage in, right?
Yeah. So the bees, you notice at home, even though you don't have the beehives, but somehow the bees come when your citrus, tree is blooming, right? I don't know where they come. I'm trying to figure it out. Can't figure it out. So, but anyway, same thing in the orchard. You get lots of different insects, beneficial insects a lot of time. They eat mites, right? So you can plant that, and you can figure it out what type of beneficial insect, what kind of pests you're having, and then you can, based on that, you can plant accordingly the hedgerow in your orchard, depending what you're growing. Let's see, we talked about dust mite, reduced use of pesticides. Well, that goes back to reducing mites. So if you don't have mites or any other kind of pest, you're going to use less pesticides. Let's see what else. Like I said, you could grow other fruit trees that you can actually get some maybe economic beneficial value added to your property. I think that's all I have right now, unless you guys have any questions, or maybe I forgot to mention something.
Yeah, so the windbreak, so a lot of the harsher winds come from the north or the south, right?
Right.
So I'm assuming when that north wind comes, it'll kind of dry out your trees a lot, especially say it's around bloom time. So that'll have a huge impact on your bloom set, right?
Right.
So a windbreak like this will probably be beneficial.
Yeah, I did notice that outside rows, sometimes though you have a heavy crop, and then the windbreak will actually help not break your tree when they're loaded with fruits and or nuts. I actually had lost a couple of trees where I didn't have the hedgerow, so it does help with that when your crops are loaded and break the wind. You can plant on the north side and the south typically, and depending how you're farming. Also, like for example, I drive down in Georgia, Washington, and a lot of people are spraying for their peaches, and you get the spray on there. If you had like a hedgerow alongside the road, like one, even though it could be a variety, just plant it close, right? And that buffers the spray when you're spraying. So that could help you not get a call from the county.
We get cars that go off the road and take out trees.
Oh, really? Oh, because of sprays.
No, they just at night they're sleeping.
Oh, sleeping.
Or something on the way
Oh.
It's like a barrier, right?
Oh, it's going to be a barrier, like
It's a barrier.
we see them on the freeway, the dividers, right?
Yeah.
The bushes. They use that hedgerow too.
What's the age of this hedgerow right here?
These are probably about 6 years.
6 years?
Yeah.
Would they get any higher, or is that the height of the
This is the highest they get. In the wintertime, we're going to cut them and use them, the cuttings, to propagate and root them. And then they'll grow again. They grow pretty fast, actually. They start growing in February.
So you have a double use for them, essentially. Right?
Yeah, I have a double
Okay.
use. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
Do you have are all your hedgerows single species, or do you have a variety of species in your hedgerows?
Well, like up north, on the north side that I have like a different prune root stocks, like M40, 29C, stuff like that. And then I have some pomegranate. So it just kind of, instead of trying to clean your ditch, they overtake, and then you don't have a lot of unnecessary plants growing, and then I kind of put it that. And I'm just like making actually, if you, I don't know if you know, but actually right here is where I started experimenting when I got into the nursery business. So right here, I fumigated here 1/8 of an acre, and I planted different peaches and prunes and walnuts a little bit. I actually had 20 trees of walnut growing here one time, so it was like a little nursery. And so now I just went with a permanent because I have other sites now.
Have you considered putting like native plants to attract different types of pollinators, or?
When I had the prunes, there was actually a lady from the University of Davis came here. We tried different stuff. I think it attracted some ladybugs for the mites or something. It's been a long time. Yeah, we tried different things.
So like if you can have a variety of different plants in your hedgerow, right? Say that attract certain butterflies, ladybugs, or bees, which are all beneficial to our plants. They pollinate the trees,
Right.
and stuff like that. And just to get more local pests in the area that might be not surviving as well, right? You're also helping their habitat as well.
Yeah, you can mix them too. You don't have to have all one. I mean, you can have maybe, depending on width of your orchard, you could have maybe 5 different species, and they attract at different time different beneficial insects, right?
Yeah.
So it just, you can mix and match, and whatever works for your crop.
How about irrigation for this?
We use irrigation, drip irrigation, 24-inch wide emitters. Yeah.
How do you go about spacing for the hedgerow?
We do about 5 feet apart. And it all depends the type of hedgerow you're going to plant. Some plant might not go wider, they go straight up. So then you're going to have to plant maybe every 3 feet. Straight out.
And it probably depends on what you have growing in your field, right? Say this is a row crop, the
Right.
plants are a little bit shorter. You can get away with probably a shorter hedgerow, right?
Right.
Like smaller plants.
Yeah. Yeah. It just depends. I've seen a lot of people plant trees that go straight up, and they're like, I think maybe every 2 feet or something. I've seen it, you know.
So I do row crops, and we have hedgerows. We have a variety of species in our hedgerows. We do plant some trees. We have California oak and sycamore trees, and those are obviously a much taller trees. We try to diversify the species that we put in our hedgerows. So we have the tall trees, but we also have large shrubs, and then we have subshrubs. So we're kind of covering every height there. So, you know, we'll have our trees are actually more like 15 feet apart, or 15 to 20 feet apart, and then in between, because you know those big oaks and sycamores get huge in the top of their canopy when they get old, and so we fill in that blank space in between, obviously for the growing years, and then after, once they get big, those shrubs are kind of taking up that space.
And they're mostly native plants, right? To our
Ours
area.
are 100% native.
So 100% native.
Yeah.
And that's beneficial to insects in the area as well.
Yeah, well, and it's also, when you use native plants, it's really beneficial from an irrigation perspective even, because at a certain point, native plants become much less reliant on irrigation. Obviously, when they're first planted, they require a little more input, a little more irrigation, a little more care, a little more TLC. But once they reach a certain age, you can really back off the irrigation and just kind of let them go as far as like once they get, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old. They're established. You don't even really need to irrigate them, period. Because they're natives, they're going to rely on the up and down cycle of dry and wet. So that's definitely a benefit.
Acclimated to the area that they're already in. That's their area, right? Their native area.
Right. One of the downsides, though, is finding native plants from a nursery is a lot more difficult. And you're definitely not getting the same like multi-benefit that something like this is. Like, you're using this for rootstock, and propagating your cuttings, like that's a huge beneficial use. Not something you would get obviously from a native hedgerow. So
Jen, I have a question for you. The ones that you have then, since they're native, do you still go through and cut them back or manicure them, or once they're established, they just kind of...
Yeah, so it really depends on the grower. So for us, we definitely keep ours a little more manicured. It's a lot closer to where we're growing our row crops than some others. But I know, like, up the road from ours is a more well-established hedgerow that's not quite on top of their row crop. And they definitely, I rarely see them out there. Like, they're not really manicuring it. It's established. Those plants just kind of do whatever they're doing. So I would say at the beginning, in the first 5-6 years, yeah, you're
More
doing a
so.
little more manicuring, and then once they get to a certain point, you kind of just let them go.
Okay. And Paul, you said you do it once a year.
Yeah, once a year. And also I noticed we have a ditch, and then we had a lot of runoff. Like when we get a lot of rains, like when it pours, it would kind of just a lot of runoff we see in the ditch, and we had to clean it, and it kind of helps me with that too.
Well, it probably helps with the ditch bank as well, like keeping the ditch bank
Yes,
defined.
right.
Yeah.
And then another thing I noticed, it was like in the nursery business, you observe a lot salt and stuff. So when I had a different type of, these can tolerate more salt, like the Hansons, but I had different rootstock, and then if I grow them here versus in the back of the orchard, this did good because it had a good drainage right next to the ditch. So when you get rain, it flushed out the salts. So the same rootstock did a lot better here. So it gives me more data, I guess, you know. It helped me lots of ways.
How long will you keep these trees in this hedgerow before you just like replant them?
I'll probably take another 5 years. Yeah.
Is there a reason you picked this specific hedgerow?
Not really. It was just like space. I needed. I slowly, what I did is I have about 12 acres now just dedicated to nursery, different rootstock. At that time, when I first started, I just pulled like 4 or 5 rows to get my budwood from almond. So I go to the University of Davis and I get from the mother trees, the budwood that I started and then as I grew into this business, I noticed that I needed more and more of every type of rootstock. Everybody, like just for prunes, for example, some people prefer 29C, some prefer M40, there's less suckering, and we got away from Mariana rootstock. It had a lot of suckering problem back in the day. That's what everybody planted, and new ones came across. So then we kept ripping like another 3 acres and plenty more, and then I needed more space, right? But then we planted like Viking, Hanson. So just like but that's why I started here, because this is what we're selling down south, right? And like for example, crimps, we don't have the license yet, and so in a couple of years we will. Then we can sell up here, but that's why we have these type of hybrid rootstocks.
So the cost would be like purchasing a tree, right? A rootstock.
Well, so what we do is for almond varieties, we grow the rootstock, right? And then whatever variety that you want, then we'll bud that. And we usually our budding starts around late April for almonds, and by June we're all done. And so, for example, if you want a Viking, we'll grow some Viking. And with some, typically we get 40% of the orders before we even plant. So we kind of know, and then we kind of know our customer base, what they like in certain areas and what works. And then we just kind of grow, and then on speculation, we'll grow another 30% more. And sometimes, when you grade stuff, so you always end up growing more, right? You bud them, there's a bud failure, right? There's trees that make the size, like, there's just like, you always grow like 20, 30% more than what you're going to sell.
Yeah. And so you said you're going to take these out in 5 years. What are you going to replace them with? Do you know that yet?
Probably crimps, because it's going to be available in a couple of years, so I'll probably go with that. And also there's new rootstocks come across, and now recently crimps was very popular, but there were some, I guess, compatibility questions going around. Recently, it's just kind of something just happened this year, so we don't know what the market's going to be. We might not plant crimps, right? In 5 years, right? There might be another rootstock. Maybe the university will come up better rootstock for almonds, so we might plant that. So yeah, it all depends. But they're gonna the rootstock. They're kind of all gonna be like this, right? Sucker's gonna grow, and we're gonna take, and they're gonna grow back again. So it won't matter that much.
You can probably shape this how you want it to. Like if it's on a property line or near a property line, I should say, you could probably run a topper or hedger and make it into a hedge type. Right?
Oh yeah.
And so then it'll grow tall but not wide.
Right. You could do it, but we like to get the new growth for propagating, so we want all of them growing, right? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Can you see these like keeping animals such as like coyotes and deer out of your orchard, like especially in early stages where they kind of take over and like eat
The
trees?
coyotes, if there's water in your orchard, that's what they come by, for the water, basically, right? And the poor rabbits and squirrels get blamed for your, rip line chewed up, but it's not. It's always coyote. Sometimes I just like to come out here and sit and just observe things that I've seen coyotes. And rabbits and squirrels don't eat them. They tear them apart. They look for the water, right? And we even try some tubs with water, and that do help. And then because the coyotes, they like to come in the same kind of area where they're like 4 rows and chew the same hoses. So if you put water there, they figured it out after a while. Like, okay, why am I doing this? There's water here, right?
So I think what Jeevan is asking. So I know he has an issue with deer. He has younger trees, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Like one, I think, a year or 2 years old.
Uh-huh.
So the baby tree. So what he's asking is a hedgerow if it'll keep the deer out and keep the coyotes off his property. So I know a certain section I went to his orchard, and a lot of them are eating off the tree plants and stuff. So this might be beneficial to him because they can.
Yeah, if they're entering like if you have them really close, like a fence, like you get a hedgerow that the coyotes can't come through. Obviously, they're gonna go to your neighbors, right? Or they can get to it, right?
Yeah.
So it might help. I believe.
Yeah, and it's beneficial in both ways.
Yeah.
You're saving your tree and you're planting a hedgerow that can
Right.
help pollinate your trees later on.
Right.
As well. So it has a double use.
Right.
And if you're in an area that has heavy runoff in the wet years, it's
Yeah.
also good to go there as well.
Right.
I think if you're trying to detract something like coyotes to maybe the multi-story approach would be beneficial, something a little denser, right? So like this is obviously it looks dense, but at that base they're what did you say, they're 5 foot spacing?
Yeah.
So there's 5 feet of like just there's nothing there, you can just go right under it. But if you're if you're doing more of the multi-story approach, you're gonna have plants that are a lot denser, a lot lower. So if you're putting more like low story shrubs, it's going to be harder for them to get through that, and bigger shrubs. So like if you look at I know our hedgerow has these really tall shrubs that are really dense from the top all the way to the bottom, like elderberry or coffeeberry, like those types of native plants, they get really dense down at the bottom. It's actually very difficult to go through it.
Right.
And then you can add, so one of the plants we have in our hedgerow is a California wild rose. Those are super prolific. They reseed themselves because in the winter, they the rose, what are those called? Rose hips, and then they break off and then they go reseed themselves in the hedgerow, and you get these California wild roses that are just kind of growing all throughout your hedgerows. They're really thorny, also a really good deterrent and like difficult to get through. And so I think a lot of planting a hedgerow is just figuring out what is the specific benefit that you're trying to get out of your hedgerow, and choosing the species that you're planting based on that goal. So if your end goal is a windbreak like this, and your end goal is to have rootstock to propagate, then you're going to do your hedgerow one way. If your goal is to keep predators out, if your goal is to attract native pollinators, if your goal is you want lots of monarchs on your property, those are all going to be determining factors when you choose which plants to put in your hedgerow. I think, and then from there, that's also going to determine the rest of your planting, because if you have native plants, maybe you're putting in drip line and you're planning your irrigation a certain way because you're not going to want to water your hedgerow as much as you water your orchard, right? You don't necessarily want them to be on the same schedule. Something like this, perfect, you're on the same schedule because they're the same.
They're same.
They're the same, and so they're going to be on the same schedule. But something like a rose, you don't want to waste your money watering your native hedgerow on the same schedule because it doesn't need as much water, for example. And so you'll probably want to put, a shut-off valve so that when you turn on your system, you can shut off the water to your hedgerow and only turn it on when you want to irrigate it. But something like this, you wouldn't even really need a shutoff valve. You just have it open. It runs when your orchard runs.
Right.
Do you have a shutoff valve here? Or?
We do have it if you want to shut it off, because the reason I have it is because when we're irrigating fertilizer, if you put, like we have 2 sets, right?
Yeah.
So then you don't want to put too much where they get really big and they become useless. So that's the reason we have a gate, basically.
Jen, do you see, because you said yours, you have lower stuff, so like on Paul's trees we can see the base of the tree. Do you think that but I guess you also said that you have more of the rose stuff that sits lower, so maybe that keeps like the pests, like squirrels or whatnot, out of it, right? 'Cause, like I'd assume like how that's a tree as well behind us, but it's much lower, so maybe you can have pests living in there, whereas in Paul's you could see the base and there's nowhere for pests to hide per se, right? So I guess do you see a pest problem in your row crops really, with like squirrels and eating your row crops?
What is a pest?
What is your row crop? Yeah.
So we rotate between tomatoes, sunflowers, and dry beans.
Okay.
The hedgerows that we have, I think the oldest one we have was planted in 2017, so we're fairly new to the hedgerow business. But that one's the most established, and that's been tomatoes every year.
Okay.
We do see there's a lot of birds.
Right.
And I've definitely seen some squirrels. They're not as big of a problem in the tomatoes. They're more of a problem for the hedgerow. We've had some rodents, so coffeeberry puts out these seeds. It's called coffeeberry because they look like coffee beans. And we've had some pests chew a hole in the drip tape and stuff coffee beans into the drip tape and block the drip tape. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking, but they were like, this seems like a great place to hide all of these little seeds. But we found, this much drip hose just full of coffee berry seeds. Anyways, they seem like they're more of a problem for the hedgerow, and they tend to stay in the hedgerow rather than go out into the tomatoes.
Right.
This particular hedgerow is also right next to a slough, which is very dense.
Right.
And so, as far as keeping pests, keeping ground squirrels and such out of our field, it's not going to happen because the hedgerow's not going to make much of a difference when you have our hedgerows. It's the length of our field, but it's I want to say 2,000 feet maybe at the longest. It's densest for 1,000 feet, but then there's 6 miles of slough right there, and that's not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
So that goes back to what's the goal of your hedgerow, right? So our goal is not to keep rodent pests out, because we're not going to accomplish that. Our goal was more, our goal was a little different. We were approached by our cannery, and they were interested in getting more sustainable practices like hedgerow that are very visible and very popular in their supply chain. And so that was one of the reasons that we planted it, was because the cannery actually funded our hedgerow through a grant through General Mills, and we worked with the Xerces Society, and the agreement we had was we provided the labor, they provided the planning and the plants. We also provided the irrigation, obviously, and the maintenance. So that was a pretty good deal, but that's another, one of the other reasons you might consider planting a hedgerow is because your customer is interested in having that type of practice in their supply chain. It looks, the consumer is interested today in today's society in those types of practices. What are your farmers doing to give back to the world to make sure that the environment is, on track? And so that was one of the reasons that we did it.
So one last thing I want to mention, does it increase your yield? On mine, especially in the prunes when they were ripe. Yeah. So I guess I get a couple more bins in the first 3 to 4 rows. Especially I see So yeah, it could increase your yield also.
Yeah, definitely. I think it obviously depends on the crop.
Right.
So, like for example, tomatoes, they're not that's not a pollinated crop. They self-pollinate, so it's
Yeah.
not the increase in yield would be negligible.
Yeah.
But for something, we're also doing hybrid sunflower, and that is a pollinated crop. We do put these out, and so I think the increase in yield is definitely a reality, but it's very, it's distance wise, like from, it's really dependent on where your hedgerow is. Like you might see an increase in yield for like the first 50 yards maybe, but beyond that, it's not going to be, it's not going to be for your whole orchard or your whole field.
Anyone?
Yeah, so I think as farmers, we all know the cost of pesticides, right?
Right.
And in the long run, you're spending a lot of money trying to keep mites out, and you can save a lot of money. This is like more of a long-term investment. So, can you talk more about how much you could save almost?
You're gonna plant it once, and you're gonna save it for the maybe next 12 years, how long ever you want to keep it. If you even save on one spray, because you know how mite, it starts on one side of your orchard and then it can just take over within a week or something. So if you're able to avoid even saving one spray, I say per acre you're saving maybe $30, depending what type of mite spray you're going to put. So it multiply that by, I guess, 10 years, there's definitely a benefit.
Depending on the acreage you have, you're probably saving hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Not only that, is like close to harvest time. Sometime if you have a mite problem, they might recommend you can only use particular ones, and they're usually very expensive, and so that could delay your harvest. Also, sometimes you can't, especially when like peaches and stuff, they have to be harvested within a week, right? There's a lot of different benefits.
Do you ever spray this?
We hardly ever need to spray this. Maybe for peach twig borer if they become issue, right? But they grow very early before the peach twig borer becomes an issue. They're already grown to a certain height, so we don't need to spray much at all. Yeah. And that's it, I guess. I don't have any more things to say.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. So, just a little bit more on the programs available. So, if anybody is interested in hedgerows, we can help you guys apply for a grant through the CDFA. We'll pay for partial amount of money for the hedgerow and planting pollinators and other types of plants to go into your hedgerow. And also, like our past event, the compost event, I can also help you apply for that as well, and future events as well. So stay in touch. Thank you.